Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well today. It is a beautiful day here today. You can see Yoli sunbathing down there in the sunshine. And I thought I would sit down with you this morning and talk about a plant that I have never really done a deep dive on my channel before. And to be honest, there's not a lot of information about this one when growing it as a house plant. So I thought I would share some of what I've learned in the time of owning this plant. It is the Cordyline, also known as the Cordyline. I've heard it pronounced different ways. And I believe the one that I've got here is the Cordyline fruticosa Congo. That's what I've seen it listed as online. And as you can see, it is a really beautiful house plant. It's kind of like, in some ways, a cross between a calathea and an aglaonema when it comes to its care requirements. And it's definitely been a little bit of a learning curve for me to get to know this plant. So I'm hoping this video should help to shed some light on things for you and make it much easier when growing it. But first, if you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learnt over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And yeah, as I say, this one is commonly grown as an outdoor plant, but today we're going to be specifically looking at how to grow for this plant, grow for this plant and care for it as an indoor plant. So yes, I hope you enjoy it and I hope you find it useful. Let's get into it. So the Cordyline originates from the Western Pacific Ocean region, and although it's not a plant that you typically see every day, it is one that I'm suddenly starting to see more of in UK garden centres. I stumbled across my one here, I think about 7 months ago now. It was just before my birthday, so yeah, about 7 months ago. And I'd never seen this type of plant before sold as a house plant, and it was probably about that big at the time, and it was about £5, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get it, I'm gonna have a play about, see what it does for me. And it has done amazingly well in my time of owning it. And as you can see towards the top here now, it's starting to give me the most beautiful variegation. And besides just the genes of the plant, I firmly believe that this is down to the way that I'm growing it and the conditions that I am growing this plant in. So yeah, when I first got this plant, as I say, there was not a huge amount of information online, so everything I've done for this plant has kind of been a little bit of trial and error, a lot of me kind of figuring things out for myself. And the first thing I did when I got this plant, as I say, it didn't have as much variegation, it was very green. I put it in at the time, my living room, because I got this when I was living back at my old flat. And it was in kind of like medium to low lighting conditions, I would say. And the plant did grow for me in that spot and it seemed fairly happy. However, since I've moved here, I've got it in the window just behind me here. I want to say this is east facing, but I will put it on the screen because I can't remember off the top of my head, but I've had it right in that window there. So although it doesn't get much direct sun, it gets bright and direct light all day round. And since doing that, the speed at which this one grows has dramatically increased. And as I say, the beautiful white variegation has also increased. And this is a really common thing for not just Cordyline, but all types of plants that have variegation, because the white that you see here, the really pretty kind of painted markings, they actually don't contain any chlorophyll at all, and the chlorophyll is the stuff that makes our plants green, but it also means that your plants aren't able to essentially absorb light in the same way as they are if they were purely green. It means they need to work a little bit harder. So if you're keeping your plant in a lower light spot, the variegation that the plant's got is either going to die back and kind of brown and not look very happy, or your plant is going to revert and it's going to give you lots, oh thank you Yoli, that was a big grunt. It's going to give you lots of green growth and not quite so much variegation. So yeah, in pretty much every case with variegated plants, if you are looking to heighten the variegation, increasing the light is a really good thing to do. That being said, you do need to be quite wary about burning. And again, this goes for many plants, but this is quite a thin foliaged plant. And so when I was first putting this one in this space, I didn't actually put it straight on the windowsill. I put it a little bit back from the window and I gradually increased the plant's distance to the window. And that way I've just managed to ensure that my plant doesn't scorch. It will let me know if there's any issues and if I need to change things up. But fortunately, it has acclimated really, really well, and I'm so happy with how it's growing now. But something I always say, and is very important with all plants, but particularly ones that can be a little bit susceptible to pests, which I hear the Cordyline is, and that is keeping the foliage clean. And obviously, yes, this is fantastic if you are trying to either get rid of pests or prevent pests from attacking your plants. But also, if you do let a buildup of dust and dirt kind of collect over your plant's leaves, which honestly, it happens so easily. Even if you have the cleanest house in the world, it's very easy for dust to build up without you realizing it. It essentially kind of acts as a shield on your plant's leaves and creates a layer whereby light can't often pass through, and therefore it's kind of like growing your plant in a lower light spot, even if you're not. So what I will typically do with this one is I will just sometimes get it up to the shower and I will just give it a really good spritz over. You can get like a damp cloth or something like that and kind of wipe down the leaves, but I find it so much easier to just get the plant into the shower, as I say. What are you doing, Yuli? You're very pacey today. We haven't done the walk yet, and I think that is the next thing on the cards. But yeah, as I say, although touch all the wood, so far I haven't encountered pests on this plant. From some of like the Reddit forums and stuff like that I was looking at of accounts of people owning this plant, I can see that it is very susceptible to spider mites, and spider mites can be such a nightmare with houseplants. One of the really great ways that you can avoid getting spider mites is just to create a slightly more humid environment within your home, because spider mites love warm, dry air. I think she just wants cuddles. So yeah, I will typically try and keep the humidity in this space at least kind of 60% if I possibly can. I've got a humidifier that I run as and when I need to. I don't kind of religiously run my humidifier every single day, but I try to just keep the humidity up if I possibly can. And with many tropical plants, including the Cordyline, they're just going to thank you for it, because it's going to mean that not only are they far less prone to pests such as spider mites, but things like browning edges, browning tips, cracked leaves, all of these sort of things can also be avoided, because a lot of those come down to humidity. And the other thing when it comes to light, I know I sidetracked there a little bit, but a lot of people don't mind about this, and to be honest, I don't really mind. But if you don't want the growth of your plant all facing one way, if you'd like to keep it really kind of big and bushy and 360, then just making sure you're rotating your plant on a regular basis is a really good shout, because a lot of plants, including this one, will really start to kind of turn towards the light. This is a very normal thing and it's nothing to worry about. But as I say, if you do want to kind of straighten your plant out a little bit, then I would highly recommend rotating it. And a lot of the time when you see older, kind of more mature Cordyline plants, you'll notice that a lot of the bottom leaves aren't there anymore. It's almost more like Dracaena-like in its appearance. And this can be a really normal thing with plants. As they grow and mature, a lot of the time they will just let go of their younger growth. Firstly, because it's not really supporting the plant anymore. They don't need it. Sometimes if you see these lower leaves start to yellow and die back, it can actually just be your plant's way of conserving its energy. It will essentially be passing the nutrients from that leaf back into the main body of the plant so that it has more energy to grow up here. So a lot of the time it's nothing to worry about. But again, lighting wise, if your plant isn't getting enough light, that is a lot of the time when it can start letting go of these younger leaves. So just keep an eye on it. If one or two are happening, chances are it's nothing to worry about. But if you do notice lots of leaves on your plant start to die back, then that is definitely something that you should kind of take notice of. And a lot of the time, if it's not a lighting issue, classically with houseplants, it will come down to watering. And although watering a houseplant seems like the most easy thing in the world, it is the area where so many people, myself included, go wrong. And this is a plant that is quite a heavy drinker. I have noticed, I know I said at the beginning of this video, in some ways it's kind of like an Aglaonema meets a Calathea. It is one that likes quite a lot of water, and although that's a useful thing to know, it's also something to be a little bit wary of, because so often the biggest killer in houseplants is overwatering. And overwatering does not mean, just to clarify, it does not mean giving your plants too much water in one session. It just means watering them either too much or when they're not ready for a drink. And what I will do with pretty much all of my houseplants is I will keep them in their nursery pots that have the holes in the bottom like that, and I'll have these pretty cover pots that often don't offer drainage, and every time I water them I will take them out, I will soak them through, let them completely drain so that there's no excess water building up around the roots, and then I will be able to put them back into their pretty pots, and that works really, really well. And this is a plant that enjoys its soil being consistently moist in my experience, and that doesn't mean soaking wet and sopping or anything like that. It just means evenly moist throughout. So if you're not quite sure, I like to let the top kind of surface layer, in fact, as it is right now, the top surface layer of the soil dry out. You can see that's quite, oh, if the camera will focus, that's quite dry and crumbly. And then when that's dried out, then I'll go ahead and give the plant a proper soak through. You can use things like moisture meters and stuff like that to stick into the soil and help you tell if you're not quite sure. But often when you get to know a plant, I find it's actually easier to just kind of look at the plant and monitor it. And what I've noticed with this one is, again, when it's ready for a drink, not only will the top layer of soil be dry, but its leaves will be a little bit curly. And this is very subtle. But if you look at the plant at the moment, you'll see the edges of some of its leaves are just a little bit turned in instead of flat. And that, as I say, I've grown the plant for about 7 months now. That is something that I have noticed is a sign of the plant telling me it could do with a drink. So I will absolutely go ahead after this video and give the plant some water. And when it comes to fertilizing for this plant, again, I am personally nowadays a year-round fertiliser. I know I've said it before, I never used to be. I would always say outside of the spring and summer months, cut the fertiliser out. But nowadays, so long as my plants are in an active state of growth, so long as they're giving me new leaves, I will continue to fertilise them all year round, just because if they're giving me new growth, chances are they are going to require some extra nutrients and energy in order to support that growth, or else, like I said earlier, they will probably start sacrificing their own foliage in order to do that work, and I don't want that to happen. So the fertiliser that I personally use is called Liquid Gold Leaf. I'll link it down below. But whatever it is that you choose to use with your plant, what I will always say is just make sure that you introduce your fertiliser slowly if this is like a new thing for you. Because a lot of the time, if you've got a plant that you've never fertilised before and it's used to living in a very low nutrient environment, it will kind of have adapted to that way of living, and giving it a sudden hit of nutrients can send that plant into shock, and it can, in like awful circumstances, cause the plant to die. So if you're introducing fertiliser for the first time, I would say start with a little bit less than it tells you to use, and assuming everything goes well, then as time goes on, just gradually build that up to what it tells you to on the bottle. But yeah, pretty much since I have got this plant, I've been fertilising it every single time I've watered it, and I've had no issues at all. If this plant was to go into a bit of a state of dormancy, if it was to be no longer giving me new leaves, I would just cut back on the fertiliser for a while, keep watering it, as I've already said, with normal water, and then when I start to see the signs of growth again, then I would start the fertilising again. You might notice though, if you've recently repotted your plant, or if it's in a fairly new soil mix, then you might not need to fertilise for a while. It might be absolutely fine getting all of its nutrients from the soil. I probably overdo the fertiliser at times, but I personally will still fertilise. Whether or not that's the best advice to give, I don't know, but that is just what I personally choose to do. But this one is a plant that I've heard can grow very well in semi-hydroponics. I haven't tried it, so I can't speak from personal experience, but I do think when I come to repot this plant, I will probably transfer it into some kind of semi-hydro, probably a Lechuza Pon type thing, just because I've spoken so much about my love of semi-hydro before. It means maintaining your plant, kind of keeping an eye on it, checking out its watering needs. All of that becomes so much easier and so much lower maintenance. And when you've got a lot of plants, that is a really nice thing sometimes. However, at the moment, it's growing in a chunky soil mix with, I can see lots of things like orchid bark, perlite, something that is very moisture retaining, but also allows your plant to drain and not kind of store water in a very dense mix. I think that's very important for this plant. So again, looking at what it's growing in currently, if I was to go out and buy a pre-made kind of soil mix for this plant, I would probably go for something like a Calathea mix, and I think this plant would do really, really well in it, because that kind of looks like what it's growing in at the moment. But then when it comes to temperature for this plant, besides just looking at this plant's natural environment, where it originates from, as I say, I am going off my own experience, and in this space that I'm in at the moment, I do my best to keep the temperature minimum about 18 degrees. It does sometimes drop a little bit lower overnight, and that's totally normal. Pretty much every single houseplant, even the most finicky tropical houseplants, can tolerate a drop in temperature at night because it's natural. But I try to keep the temperature between 18 and 25 degrees if I possibly can. I don't have any sort of like fancy temperature regulators or anything like that, but I am very lucky in the sense that I've got underfloor heating, so if it goes below 18, I kind of crank it up a little bit, and then I obviously open the windows and stuff if I need to. But that is a temperature range that I found works really well for this plant. We're obviously coming into the much warmer spring, summer months now, and I feel pretty solid in the fact that this one's going to be okay, because I don't know, I don't want to jinx it, but I've just had such a good experience with this plant so far with nothing going wrong. But the one thing that you obviously do need to bear in mind is that as your plant's conditions change, whether it's light, heat, humidity, whatever it is, cold drops, you do just need to be aware of the fact that their watering requirements are going to change, and you might need to adjust certain elements as you go based on what your plant's telling you. So I just try my best with a big plant collection to just really observe them and to kind of see what I think they need from that, because a lot of the time the signs and symptoms that you see on your plants are their way of telling you that something's not right. And if you really take the time to get to know them, then you will be able to figure it out. Like, I know it can be quite overwhelming if everything starts going wrong at once, but most of the time your plants are actually kind of guiding you as to what they need. So yeah, when it comes to things like propagation for this plant, this is something I actually can't speak firsthand on because I have never propagated this plant. However, looking at the structure of it, again, very similar to something like Dieffenbachia, Aglaonema, even Dracaena, you can see it's got the big long stem that is very condensed with growth. And if I was to propagate this plant, I think what I would probably do is I would chop the main stem in half. I would probably remove some of the lower leaves from the cutting that I had. In fact, I have an example, I'll show you. So yeah, here I've got an Aglaonema and what is this? Dieffenbachia, that's the one. These are ones that I propagated a while ago. They're propping in water, and as I say, they actually, in their mature form as full plants, do grow in a very similar structure to this plant. And I took some cuttings, and like for example with this one, I did just remove all of the leaves down here. I've put it into water, and the plant has rooted beautifully. And in fact, that's happened, well, this one is definitely due to be potted up, but that's happened for both of them. So if I was going to go about propagating that plant, personally, that is what I would do. I would probably go in with water propagation, although sphagnum moss is always a great shout as well. Those are just my personal preferences. But yeah, on the whole, I just find it a really enjoyable plant to grow. And as I say, all of a sudden, I am seeing so many of them pop up in garden centres. So I'm glad that hopefully the demand for this plant is there and people are enjoying growing it, because it's a really lovely one. It really is. I couldn't recommend it enough. And yeah, I really hope this video has been useful. As I always say, if you've got any specific questions about this plant, please do comment them down below. Equally, if you think I've missed anything or I haven't covered anything, then please do let me know, comment it down below. But if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.
Stay sexy, plant lovers.